Welcome to the MontCAS Test Security and Data Integrity video series. The purpose of this video is to provide the viewer with tools for ensuring assessments are accessible and students are meaningfully included in the assessments to the fullest extent possible. This video will explore these four objectives so the viewer can complete this training with the following understandings. The purpose of accessibility supports is to eliminate the effects of student barriers that prevent them from demonstrating what they know and can do. All students work toward grade-level academic content standards via differentiation and appropriately selected supports and accommodations. The ESSA also requires states to reinforce the accessibility of assessment through the appropriate accommodations for students with disabilities and incorporate principles of universal design for learning for all required assessments. One way to build instruction that eliminates barriers for most, if not all, students is to use universal design for learning principles. Each assessment comes with its own specific set of accessibility features. Though these assessments differ in the terminology they use to describe supports for accessibility, the MontCAS tests focus on universal design for learning principles. These assessments embed accessibility resources, policies, and features important for educators to know and appropriately utilize for each student. Also, with every Student Succeeds Act, for all to mean all, it has to mean each. Accessibility supports fall into three categories. Accommodations must be students served with IEP or 504 plan. Designated features, students with specific support needs. Universal features for all students. All MontCAS assessments have these three accessibility supports in place to support students. Let's discuss these different learners a little more. Students with disabilities are students who are eligible to receive services identified through the Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA, or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. English learners are students whose native language is a language other than English and has had a significant impact on the student's level of English language proficiency. English learners with disabilities are students who are English learners as defined above and are also eligible to receive services through IDEA or Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. General education students are students who do not have an identified disability or EL status. Although it is understood that students with disabilities and English learners are also general education students, this term is used simply to refer to students who do not have a disability, are not identified as SD or EL, or who are not identified as an EL with a disability. For all students to succeed, each student must have access to the resources and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education, regardless of their race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, family background, or income. We are committed to serving these students and providing them with the supports they need to ensure equity for all students. Universal design for learning guidelines were developed by CAST. There are three main principles. The first is the idea of providing multiple means of representation. This means presenting information, content, and assessment in multiple formats so that all students have access. An example of this is to present information in a visual or auditory format. The second principle is to provide multiple means of action and expression. This would allow students different ways to express or demonstrate their learning. So for a writing product, you might allow a student to use a keyboard instead of a pen. Or you might allow students to choose a format for assignments, like writing a text, giving a speech, creating a film, or writing a song. The third principle is providing multiple means of engagement or stimulating students' interests and motivation for learning in a variety of ways. Some examples provide options that include collaboration and communication, and providing options that are relevant and authentic, like using money when teaching math or making culturally significant activities. When assessment and instruction are designed with these principles, barriers are reduced or eliminated for all students, including those with disabilities. Using a UDL approach in the design of assessments and instruction will make assessments and instruction accessible to all students and should reflect the learning goal. Planning with a UDL on the front end will make planning at the individual student level easier. UDL assessments should reflect the learning goal, allowing students to demonstrate that knowledge in more than one way will not change the learning goal. UDL assessments should provide flexibility for demonstration of mastery, allow for scaffolds and supports, providing flexible opportunities to demonstrate knowledge and skills, meets the needs of students with disabilities who may have barriers if there is only one avenue for demonstration of the learning goal. By building in a choice, you are meeting the needs for all students, including students with disabilities who need flexibility to address barriers to meaningful participation. Once teachers have identified the goal, they can think about providing scaffolds and supports to address barriers to meaningful participation in assessments. The individual approach focuses on providing accommodations that are documented in the IEP. Changes to instruction and assessments are based on the individual student needs. When evaluating assessments, it is important to consider these characteristics of the UDL assessments. What is a needs-based approach? During the development of the Smarter Balanced Assessment, a tool called the Individual Student Accessibility and Accommodations Profile was created. Smarter Balanced identified 7 reasons for supports and accommodations and sorted the accessibility supports available for the Smarter Balanced test into those categories to provide a tool to help educators identify the available supports that are recommended for specific student needs. In Montana, the OPI added an additional category so that IEP teams can document supports for students with medical needs. Accommodations help certain students access the general education curriculum and should be used in instruction and assessment at least 3 months before statewide assessments. The supports must be familiar to the student. Students' parents and guardians should be knowledgeable about the supports and accommodations planned for their child, so they are aware of the conditions under which their child will participate in the assessment. Now please take a moment to complete these H5P questions before we move on to the next concepts.